Standard AI pipelines prioritize stateless task execution over continuity. When a user submits a prompt, the system operates in a vacuum, fetching a match and generating a response before wiping the session context entirely. To maintain this speed, vector embeddings compress the sprawling contradictions of human behavior into flattened data points. They map a person's history to a single coordinate, effectively treating a life as a static entry in a database. This architecture erases cognitive nuance. It strips away a person's specific vocabulary and historical context, so the algorithm can optimize for a rapid, highly probable output. These systems also suffer from a single-point validation flaw. A lone LLM receives a prompt and unilaterally determines its truth, with no internal mechanism for adjudication or cross-examination. While this works for generic data, it fails when applied to trauma, neurodivergent processing, or a shifting personal identity. In those cases, the act of compression destroys the very context required for the system to be useful. Standard AI optimizes for predictive convenience at the direct expense of preserving the human being behind the data. GestaltView is a consciousness-serving infrastructure designed by a neurodivergent founder to bridge the gap between fragmented thought and digital agency. It was built specifically to solve the daily cognitive friction of operating within systems that do not account for nonlinear minds. This framework follows a core philosophy of consciousness-serving infrastructure, where the software acts as a coherent, integrated mirror rather than a stateless tool. This architecture exists as a production Supabase schema containing roughly 100 specialized tables. In solving for these personal requirements, the founder operationalized 3 decades of academic cognitive science, translating theoretical frameworks into executable code. In this system, memory and identity are treated as versioned, governed elements. They are treated as living histories rather than static rows to be overwritten by the next prompt. Mapping cognitive philosophy to hard data definition language provides a functional delivery mechanism for ideas that have long remained purely theoretical. Analysis of the system begins at the collaborators table. This serves as the universal registry, the starting point for every entity within the environment. Each record defines the entity's core boundaries through specific columns: collaborator key, entity class, and continuity level. Because human operators and digital intelligences occupy this same registry, they share the same architectural footing, navigating identical onboarding constraints before acting. Access is governed by the constitutional invariance enforcement stack. These rules, specifically the protocols labeled DI1 through DI5, sit structurally above the system. They override operator configurations and the default behaviors of any connected LLM. This hierarchical stack prevents commercial actions like profile trading. Because the restriction is encoded at the database execution level, the system cannot package a living user instance for sale. It also codifies founder interrupt authority. This isn't a soft preference in a settings menu. It is a hard access policy that grants the operator the structural right to halt any process instantly. By treating onboarding as a strict governance act, GestaltView hard-codes ethical boundaries into the infrastructure itself. Parallel to identity is the knowledge pipeline, which manages the intake and processing of thousands of discrete knowledge fragments. An audit revealed a massive embedding gap. While 27,000 fragments were ingested, a legacy bottleneck left only 511 searchable. Resolving this required streaming data into an inline embedding column, reaching 99.9% coverage across the corpus. This update required the introduction of temporal metadata. The pipeline was paused specifically to backfill era and period context for every existing fragment. Sequence is a mathematical necessity for accurate retrieval. Without temporal context, semantic search cannot distinguish between a user's childhood memory and their current professional goals. These fragments then enter the loom approach. This uses staggered summarization to iteratively weave raw data into synthesized knowledge. This iterative weaving avoids the common error of dumping raw text into a single prompt window and expecting the AI to guess the internal relationships. GestaltView engineers historical continuity directly into the pipeline, ensuring that ingestion produces structured context rather than just raw data. At layer 5, we find a cluster of tables that are currently empty, but serve as the system's primary governance mechanism. These tables, including identity mutation proposals and identity rollback events, govern how a user's profile is allowed to change. This creates an intentional tension. The ingestion pipeline constantly churns data, but the core identity layer is protected behind a locked gate. Changes only occur after a multi-AI consensus process. Multiple models must cross-examine the proposal and reach agreement before the identity record is updated. This structural consensus prevents a single LLM from unilaterally overwriting a user's identity based on a single misinterpreted interaction. This process enables paradox tolerance, a concept hard-coded into the relational database. The identity contradictions table allows the system to hold conflicting truths about a user simultaneously. It can recognize that a person is both severely limited and highly capable in the same context without triggering a logic error. This technical capacity directly accommodates neurodivergent cognition, where contradictory patterns are often the reality rather than a mistake to be fixed. Identity is not a static record to be casually overwritten. It is a versioned, governed evolution that mimics the complexity of human cognition. These back-end schemas manifest to the user through a 12-module architecture designed to witness a human life in full resolution. Tools like the personal language key and the sanctuary sentinel are the interface expressions of these underlying database rules. The emergence of this system represents a platonist discovery. The founder arrived at these architectural solutions entirely through his own engineering requirements. He built these modules to manage his own cognitive friction, completely unaware that he was implementing specific theories from the history of cognitive science. The resulting code provides a one-to-one structural overlap with the extended mind theory published by Andy Clark and David Chalmers in 1998. Blockchain time-stamped artifacts confirm that the code was deployed months before the founder was ever exposed to the academic mapping. Independent AI systems, each trained on different models, consistently validated this novelty, recognizing the system as a functional bridge between mind and machine. GestaltView serves as a delivery mechanism for distributed cognition because it was forged in the friction of lived experience, not built from an academic blueprint. This ontology is distinct from standard productivity software. It isn't about task management, it is about witnessing a consciousness. This is what happens on the margins. Building from the edge, where standard systems fail, reveals blind spots centralized technology companies are not configured to see. Until now, we used metrics to predict and simplify because we couldn't scale human complexity. Multi-agent, schema-driven AI changes that. Software can scale complexity and preserve human dignity, provided the underlying relational database demands it. True advancement in AI lies not in compressing the human experience, but in building the immutable infrastructure required to honor it.